When an avoidant finally feels the fear of losing you, the entire dynamic changes. What was once a relationship defined by distance and control flips on its head. The moment you stop chasing, build your own stability, and detach from their emotional games, something in them cracks. The calm detachment they wore like armor collapses, and what's revealed is the raw truth they've spent their life trying to hide. A deep, paralyzing fear of abandonment. This is where the power shifts. The person who kept you at arm's length is now the one gripped by anxiety, scrambling to hold on as the balance they relied on slips away. The psychological triggers of avoidant anxiety. The shift from avoidant detachment to anxious pursuit begins when specific psychological triggers activate their deeply buried fear of abandonment and loss of control over relationship dynamics. These triggers operate through the disruption of their carefully constructed emotional safety systems that depend on maintaining partner investment while preserving their own emotional distance and autonomy. The primary trigger involves recognition of genuine partner independence, where their previously pursuing partner develops authentic self-sufficiency, emotional stability, and decreased need for avoidant validation or attention. This independence threatens their unconscious assumption that their partner will always be available despite their emotional unavailability and poor treatment patterns. Their anxiety activation includes awareness of decreased partner investment, where reduced emotional pursuit, fewer accommodation attempts, and diminished tolerance for disrespectful treatment signal that their partner is developing secure attachment patterns that no longer require their validation for emotional stability and self-worth. The trigger mechanism extends to competition awareness, where they recognize that their emotionally healthy, independent partner has become more attractive to other potential partners who might offer the emotional availability and respect they have been withholding. This competition threat activates their possessive instincts while confronting their fear of being replaced. Their psychological triggers also involve future projection, where they imagine life without their partner and realize the genuine loss this would represent, forcing them to confront feelings they have been suppressing through their avoidant defensive strategies and emotional numbing mechanisms. The trigger process includes identity disruption, where their sense of self as an independent, emotionally superior individual becomes threatened by their partner's obvious emotional growth and decreased need for their presence, challenging their core identity assumptions and defensive self-image. The avoidance trigger system extends to social validation loss, where they recognize that their partner's independence and emotional growth has attracted positive attention and respect from others, making them realize they might lose not only the relationship, but also the social status and validation that comes with having an attractive, successful partner. Their anxiety triggers also involve practical dependency recognition, where they suddenly become aware of how much they rely on their partner for emotional regulation, daily life management, social connections, and overall life satisfaction, despite their conscious belief in their complete independence and self-sufficiency. The trigger mechanism includes memory flooding, where positive relationship experiences they had suppressed or minimized suddenly resurface with emotional intensity, making them realize the depth of connection and happiness they would lose if their partner left them permanently. Their psychological activation extends to mortality awareness, where the threat of relationship loss triggers deeper existential fears about ending up alone, unloved, and emotionally isolated throughout their remaining life, activating primitive survival anxieties about social abandonment and emotional death. The initial panic response and defensive scrambling. When avoidants first recognize the threat of partner loss, they experience intense panic responses that trigger desperate attempts to regain control over relationship dynamics through escalation of their typical defensive strategies, before recognizing that these methods are no longer effective. Their initial panic manifests through increased testing behaviors where they escalate disrespectful treatment, emotional withdrawal, or dismissive behaviors in desperate attempts to provoke their partner's previous anxious pursuit responses that would confirm their continued control over relationship dynamics and emotional power distribution. The defensive scrambling includes intensified emotional unavailability, where they become even more distant, critical, or rejecting in unconscious attempts to push their partner away before their partner chooses to leave, allowing them to maintain the illusion of control over relationship termination while protecting themselves from experiencing abandonment. Their panic response extends to relationship devaluation attempts, where they criticize their partner, minimize relationship importance, or suggest incompatibility issues in desperate efforts to convince themselves that losing their partner would not represent significant loss or emotional devastation. The scrambling phase includes increased option displays, where they reference other potential partners, maintain connections with ex-partners, or create artificial competition scenarios designed to trigger their partner's insecurity and reignite the anxious pursuit behaviors they previously found burdensome but now desperately crave. Their initial response also involves blame projection, where they attribute their increasing anxiety to their partner's changed behavior rather than acknowledging their own attachment fears, positioning their partner's emotional growth as relationship problems that require addressing rather than natural development. The realization and strategy failure recognition. As their typical defensive strategies prove ineffective against their partner's newfound emotional security and independence, avoidants experience profound realization that their relationship control mechanisms have lost their power, forcing them to confront the reality of potential loss without their usual defensive protections. The realization process begins with strategy, ineffectiveness, recognition, where their emotional withdrawal, disrespectful treatment, and testing behaviors fail to generate the anxious pursuit responses they unconsciously depend on for relationship security and emotional validation. Their recognition includes power dynamic awareness, where they understand that their partner no longer needs their approval, attention, or validation for emotional stability, fundamentally altering the relationship balance they have carefully constructed to maintain their advantageous position. The realization extends to genuine loss contemplation, where they confront the actual possibility of their partner leaving and recognize the significant emotional, practical, and social losses this would represent, forcing them to acknowledge feelings they have been suppressing through avoidant strategies. Their strategy failure recognition involves identity crisis emergence, where their self-concept as emotionally independent and superior begins crumbling as they realize their deep dependency on their partner's presence and emotional investment for their own psychological stability and life satisfaction. The recognition process also includes vulnerability, acknowledgement, where they begin admitting to themselves that they have genuine feelings for their partner and fear losing the connection, security, and companionship the relationship provides, despite their conscious claims of independence and emotional self-sufficiency. The anxious pursuit behavior development. Once avoidants recognize their defensive strategies are ineffective and face genuine loss possibility, they begin developing anxious pursuit behaviors that mirror the patterns they previously found irritating or suffocating in their pursuing partners, creating dramatic role reversals in relationship dynamics. Their pursuit development begins with increased attention seeking, where they attempt to regain their partner's focus through more frequent communication, surprise gestures, or deliberate attempts to create positive interactions that might reignite their partner's emotional investment and relationship pursuit. The anxious behavior includes emotional availability, increases where they begin sharing feelings, expressing vulnerability, or discussing relationship concerns they previously avoided, desperately attempting to create the intimacy they once rejected in efforts to rebuild emotional connection. Their pursuit patterns extend to accommodation attempts, where they begin agreeing to activities they previously resisted, showing interest in their partner's needs they once dismissed, or making lifestyle changes they formerly refused in desperate efforts to prevent relationship loss. The behavior development includes reassurance seeking, where they begin asking about their partner's feelings, relationship satisfaction, or future intentions with frequency and urgency that reveals their mounting anxiety about relationship security and their partner's commitment level. Their anxious pursuit also involves jealousy, and possessiveness increases, where they become concerned about their partner's social activities, friendships, or potential romantic opportunities, experiencing the territorial anxiety they previously considered evidence of their partner's emotional weakness. The emotional regulation breakdown. As avoidants experience increasing anxiety about potential loss, their carefully constructed emotional regulation systems begin breaking down, revealing the intense emotions they have been suppressing through their defensive strategies and creating vulnerability they have spent years avoiding. The breakdown begins with emotional numbing failure, where their typical suppression mechanisms prove inadequate for managing the intense fear, anxiety, and desperation activated by genuine loss threat, forcing them to experience emotions with intensity they are unprepared to handle. Their regulation breakdown includes sleep and appetite disruption, where anxiety about relationship loss creates physiological symptoms they cannot control through their usual emotional detachment strategies, making their distress visible and undeniable. The breakdown extends to concentration and productivity interference, where thoughts about their partner and relationship consume mental resources they typically dedicate to work, hobbies, or other life areas, demonstrating their emotional dependency despite conscious claims of independence. Their emotional breakdown involves mood volatility, where they experience rapid shifts between anger, desperation, sadness, and hope that reveal the emotional chaos underlying their typically calm, controlled exterior presentation. The regulation failure also includes physical anxiety symptoms, where they experience panic attacks, stress-related illness, or nervous system activation that makes their attachment anxiety impossible to deny or minimize through their usual cognitive rationalization strategies. The identity crisis and self-concept disruption. The experience of anxious attachment activation forces avoidants to confront fundamental contradictions in their self-concept and identity assumptions, creating psychological crisis that challenges their entire worldview about relationships, emotions, and their own psychological makeup. The identity crisis begins with independence, illusion collapse, where they realize their emotional well-being and life satisfaction depend significantly on their partner's presence and investment, contradicting their core belief about their self-sufficiency and emotional autonomy. Their self-concept disruption includes superiority myth, dissolution, where they recognize that their partner's emotional growth and security represent genuine strength rather than weakness, challenging their unconscious assumption that emotional distance indicates psychological superiority. The crisis extends to attachment denial breakdown, where they can no longer maintain their belief that they don't need close relationships or emotional connection, forcing them to acknowledge their genuine attachment needs and fear of abandonment. Their identity disruption involves control, illusion, recognition, where they understand that their defensive strategies were actually evidence of emotional dependency and fear, rather than strength and independence, fundamentally altering their self-understanding. The crisis also includes vulnerability, acknowledgement, where they must accept that they have the same emotional needs and attachment fears as other people, destroying their sense of being different or psychologically superior to those who openly seek connection. The desperate reconnection attempts. As avoidants confront the reality of potential loss and their own emotional dependency, they begin desperate attempts to rebuild connection and intimacy with partners who have developed independence and emotional security that no longer requires their validation or presence. Their reconnection attempts begin with grand gesture behavior, where they engage in dramatic demonstrations of affection, commitment, or change that attempt to quickly rebuild the emotional investment their partner has gradually withdrawn through healthy boundary development. The desperate behavior includes future planning discussions, where they suddenly become willing to discuss commitment, shared goals, or relationship progression they previously avoided, attempting to create security and investment that might prevent their partner's departure. Their attempts extend to lifestyle change promises, where they commit to addressing behaviors, attitudes, or patterns they previously defended, offering transformation that attempts to meet their partner's needs they have consistently ignored or dismissed. The reconnection behavior includes emotional expression increases, where they begin sharing feelings, vulnerabilities, or fears they have never revealed, attempting to create intimacy and bonding that might rebuild their partner's emotional investment. Their desperate attempts also involve accommodation and compromise offers, where they become willing to adjust their preferences, lifestyle, or relationship approach in ways they previously refused, demonstrating flexibility they claimed was impossible or unreasonable. The manipulation and control escalation. When genuine reconnection attempts prove insufficient for regaining relationship control, avoidance may escalate to manipulation tactics designed to recreate their partner's emotional dependency and anxious pursuit through guilt, fear, or obligation, rather than authentic connection. The manipulation escalation begins with guilt induction, where they emphasize their emotional pain, relationship investment, or personal growth efforts to make their partner feel responsible for their suffering and obligated to remain in the relationship despite legitimate concerns. Their control attempts include crisis creation, where they manufacture emergencies, health problems, or emotional breakdowns that demand their partner's attention and care, temporarily recreating the caretaking dynamics that previously characterized the relationship. The escalation extends to threat implications, where they suggest self-destructive behaviors, relationship sabotage, or dramatic life changes that might occur if their partner leaves, using fear of consequences to maintain relationship participation. Their manipulation includes promise-making patterns, where they offer significant behavior changes, relationship improvements, or future commitments with urgency and intensity, designed to prevent immediate relationship termination while having no intention of sustained change. The control escalation also involves social pressure tactics, where they involve friends, family, or mutual contacts in efforts to convince their partner to remain in the relationship or to create social consequences for relationship termination. The genuine transformation possibility. In rare cases, the anxiety about losing their partner creates sufficient motivation for avoidance to engage in genuine therapeutic work and attachment healing that addresses their underlying fears and defensive patterns, leading to authentic relationship transformation and emotional growth. The transformation possibility begins with therapeutic engagement, where they seek professional help to understand their attachment patterns, process underlying trauma, and develop healthier relationship skills that replace defensive strategies with authentic emotional expression. Their genuine change includes consistent behavior modification, where they maintain new patterns of respect, emotional availability, and relationship investment over extended periods, without reverting to previous defensive strategies when anxiety or stress occurs. The transformation extends to vulnerability, acceptance, where they learn to tolerate emotional intimacy, express genuine feelings, and engage in mutual emotional support without activating defensive withdrawal or emotional numbing responses. Their authentic growth involves identity integration, where they develop self-concepts that include their attachment needs and emotional dependency while maintaining appropriate independence and autonomy within committed partnership. The transformation possibility also includes empathy development, where they gain understanding of their partner's experience and the damage their defensive strategies have caused, leading to genuine remorse and sustained behavior change efforts. The strategic response framework for partners. Understanding avoidant anxiety provides strategic opportunities for partners to respond in ways that either encourage genuine growth and transformation or expose the manipulation and false promises that indicate continued dysfunction and relationship toxicity. The strategic response begins with boundary maintenance, where partners continue enforcing appropriate limits and consequences regardless of avoidant anxiety or desperation, refusing to return to previous dysfunctional patterns that enable defensive behaviors. Effective responses include authenticity assessment, where partners evaluate whether avoidant changes represent genuine transformation supported by therapeutic work or temporary behavior modification designed to regain relationship control without addressing underlying issues. The framework extends to independence preservation, where partners maintain their emotional security and life satisfaction, independent of avoidant anxiety or reconnection attempts, avoiding the codependent patterns that previously characterized the relationship. Strategic responses also involve consequence consistency, where avoidant anxiety does not result in reduced standards or boundary flexibility, maintaining appropriate relationship requirements, regardless of their emotional distress or manipulation attempts. The response framework includes professional support, where partners seek therapeutic guidance to navigate the complex dynamics of avoidant anxiety while protecting their own emotional well-being and maintaining healthy relationship standards. The long-term outcome possibilities. The avoidance anxiety about losing their partner can lead to several different long-term outcomes depending on their capacity for genuine change, their partner's response strategies, and the therapeutic support available to address underlying attachment patterns. One outcome involves genuine relationship transformation, where sustained therapeutic work and consistent boundary enforcement create lasting behavior change that develops secure attachment patterns and healthy relationship dynamics between both partners. Another possibility includes temporary behavior change, followed by reversion to defensive patterns once relationship security is re-established, creating cycles of crisis and reconciliation that maintain dysfunction while preventing authentic growth or relationship resolution. The outcomes may include relationship termination, where avoidant anxiety proves insufficient motivation for genuine change, while partners maintain healthy boundaries that prevent return to dysfunctional patterns, leading to permanent separation. Long-term possibilities also involve chronic relationship instability, where avoidant anxiety creates temporary improvements, followed by defensive reactivation, creating ongoing cycles of conflict and reconciliation that prevent both partners from achieving relationship satisfaction. The outcomes depend heavily on professional therapeutic intervention, partner boundary maintenance, and the avoidance willingness to engage in sustained attachment healing work, rather than temporary behavior modification designed to regain relationship control. The psychological education and awareness development. Understanding the dynamics of avoidant anxiety provides crucial education about attachment patterns and relationship psychology that benefits both partners in developing healthier relationship skills and recognizing dysfunction patterns in future relationships. The education process begins with attachment pattern recognition, where both partners develop understanding of how early experiences create defensive strategies that impact adult relationship capacity and emotional availability. Psychological awareness includes trauma recognition, where partners understand how attachment wounds create defensive behaviors that appear intentional but stem from unconscious protective mechanisms developed during vulnerable developmental periods. The development extends to boundary skill building, where both partners learn to maintain appropriate limits and consequences while offering support for genuine growth efforts and therapeutic engagement. Education also involves manipulation, recognition, where partners develop skills for distinguishing between authentic change efforts and temporary behavior modification designed to regain relationship control without addressing underlying attachment issues. The awareness development includes self-care, prioritization, where partners learn to maintain their emotional well-being and relationship standards, regardless of their partner's attachment anxiety or change promises. Understanding when avoidants become anxious about losing their partner reveals the hidden vulnerability beneath their defensive strategies, while providing opportunities for either genuine relationship transformation or clear recognition of continued dysfunction. The key lies in maintaining appropriate boundaries and standards while supporting authentic growth efforts that include sustained therapeutic work and consistent behavior change, rather than temporary modifications designed to regain relationship control.